All right, today we're diving into something that is, well, incredibly profound. It's an issue that touches literally millions of lives, yet it so often remains this hidden, silent struggle. We're going to be examining the deep psychological impacts of growing up in a fractured family. And to really do this justice in this explainer, we aren't just going to throw abstract theories at you. We are walking through one incredibly well-documented real-life case study of a man named Boaz Nash.
Just listen to the sheer, raw honesty of this quote. This is Boaz Nash reflecting on his life as a child of divorce. From the time he was just 3 years old all the way until he was 18, he lived this entirely split life, bouncing back and forth between his mother's house and his father and stepmother's house in California. I mean, imagine that for a second. I didn't have a single home. I have a hard time finding unity. It instantly sets the emotional stakes of what it actually means to constantly shift your reality every few days.
Section 1. Living in Two Worlds.
So, before we really get into the intimate details of Boaz's specific life and his family's history, we kind of have to ask, how exactly does living in two completely separate homes affect a developing child's worldview? Like, are his feelings of fragmentation totally unique, or is this actually a shared human experience?
Well, to answer that, we can look at a 2018 qualitative study by Johnson, Litland, and Hallstrom, which was published in the Journal of Pediatric Nursing. This study is absolutely crucial because it completely validates Boaz's experience. It proves, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that he is not alone in feeling this way.
The researchers here interviewed kids living in joint custody, and what they found was that these children frequently struggle with feelings of loss and attachment. They are desperately yearning for just a little continuity and calm, and most strikingly, they describe the experience quite literally as living in two worlds. To cope with these constantly changing environments and totally different sets of rules, kids naturally develop this rigid separation in their minds. It's like they have to build internal walls just to survive the whiplash of transitioning from one reality to the other.
Which brings us to Section 2. A Tale of Two Houses.
For Boaz, his own two worlds were geographically just a short drive apart in Santa Cruz, California, but psychologically, they were universes apart. Over at Mom's house on Mira Vista, life was super relaxed. Boaz and his brothers cooked for themselves, they played video games, they'd pick squash and plums straight from the garden, they'd ride their bikes down to the 7-Eleven. It was this very organic, independent style of living. But switch over to Dad and Stepmom Judy's house on Granite Creek, and it was a totally different universe. Highly structured. Judy commanded the kitchen. She cooked these incredible meals and kept the rooms meticulously clean. The house itself had these dark wood interiors and sat up this long cliffside driveway. Trying to reconcile these two opposing realities, going from independently picking organic squash one day to executing strictly scheduled salads the very next, it's honestly like staring at an optical illusion. Your brain genuinely struggles to hold both of those environments at the exact same time.
And you can kind of feel that vibe right here. For Boaz's mother, Azalea, playing the piano at home represented this deep sense of ease and harmony. Now, while the much more structured household over on Granite Creek sometimes criticized the relaxed nature of this home, for Boaz it offered a genuine place of self-reliance and peace.
Section 3. Echoes of the Past.
Okay, to truly understand this story, we actually have to zoom way out. Because Boaz's experience isn't just about a 1970s California divorce, it's actually the culmination of this massive, multi-generational history of survival, romance, and displacement. The roots of this family tree go all the way back to 1929, when Boaz's grandparents, Akos and Dorothy, met in Tours, France, right on the eve of a rapidly changing Europe. Then, jumping forward a bit to 1965, his parents Peter and Azalea meet folk dancing in Berkeley. Boaz is born in 1976, and then just 3 years later in 1979, the divorce happens and that split life begins.
I mean, just listen to the deep romanticism baked into this 1929 letter written by grandfather Akos to Dorothy. Even though they were separated by oceans and completely uncertain futures, you can practically feel the resilience, the optimism, and this fierce independence that would eventually trickle all the way down through the generations of this family.
And you see that same immense bravery passed down for sure. Here's a letter from July 1965, where Boaz's father, Peter, is detailing his time marching in the civil rights movement down in Bogalusa, Louisiana. As a medical professional, he writes about proudly wearing his white coat while literally facing down state troopers and enduring horrible racial epithets. It shows an incredibly strong moral compass.
But alongside that romance and resilience, we have to acknowledge that this family also carried the heavy weight of massive historical trauma. Akos's family suffered devastating, unthinkable losses in Auschwitz. Judy's parents were survivors who had to flee the Armenian genocide in Turkey. And Boaz's mother's side navigated the vast struggles of the Jewish diaspora from the Pale of Settlement. These aren't just historical footnotes. These are incredibly thick threads of history that inevitably echo down through the generations, fundamentally shaping how a family processes stress, conflict, and ultimately separation.
Section 4. The struggle for healing. Bringing this all back to the present day, we can see this exact struggle spill out in a series of really raw family emails from 2021 and 2022. Boaz bravely attempts to explain to his dad and stepmom the lifelong anxiety and depression he's faced. He writes, "I see that my response to this situation was to create a rigid separation between the houses in my mind. It has been a very long path to feeling like an integrated person." He is directly echoing what that pediatric nursing study told us earlier, right? The mind literally builds walls just to survive the two worlds.
And here is his father, Peter's response. You can tell Peter is genuinely shocked, but you can also read the undeniable love in his words. He tells Boaz he honestly never knew he was in therapy, because from Peter's perspective, they had provided this excellent, opportunity-filled childhood with good schools, summer camps, international travel. He truly, genuinely believed Boaz was living a charmed life. And then there's Judy's perspective, which is equally human. Her response is definitely defensive, yes, but it stems from a completely valid desire to be recognized and remembered for the massive effort she put into raising 5 children while working a full-time job. She wants the great meals and the love to be what's remembered. As she points out, no one comes out of childhood unscathed. What we are looking at here are 3 different people holding 3 entirely different realities of the exact same childhood.
Because here's the complex truth. The trauma of the split life was undeniably real for Boaz. But at the exact same time, so were the profound love, the support, and the really beautiful connections shared with his father, like on this trip to France. Both of those things are true at the exact same time.
Section 5. Finding a unified self.
So how do we actually reconcile these completely contradictory experiences into one cohesive identity? Well, Boaz uses this brilliant metaphor from physics and math, the duck-rabbit illusion. It's that famous image where you look at it and you can see a duck, or you can see a rabbit, but your brain fundamentally struggles to see both of them at the exact same moment. This just perfectly encapsulates the difficulty of holding 2 opposing realities. The total peace of mom's house and the rigid structure of dad's house. Or the pain of the trauma alongside the joy of the family vacations. Holding both in your mind at the exact same time. The absolutely crucial point we should all take away from this explainer is that the path to wholeness isn't about choosing just one rock in the river to stand on and pretending the others don't exist. It's about becoming broad enough to bridge the gap between them. It's about accepting the whole, complex, messy picture, acknowledging the real pain of the fragmentation, but also celebrating the incredible strength, adaptability, and resilience that came from surviving it.
I want to leave you all with this final provocative thought. It's a line drawn directly from a poem written by Boaz's father, Peter. Even if you forget all this, what will you remember the rest of your life? When you look back at the fragmented, contradictory, beautifully messy moments of your own history, how will you integrate them into the unified person you are today? Thank you so much for exploring this with me.